you think, oh, they can make it go viral. You're simply concerned about virality and not integrity. You need to be more conscious of integrity compared to going viral. Of course, going viral would mean that more people know your product and they should eventually buy it. If, for example, you want to teach me Latin and you don't know me, the only thing you will succeed at is teaching Latin, but you may not be able to teach me. Why is that? You don't know the best way to impart knowledge into me, and you don't know when you are overstretching me.
Get the right target audience for that particular product.
So from there, you can see what kind of content.
Hello, everyone. And my name is Oluwayemisi Adebayo, and we are on another set for the EB concept, where we will be talking with another expert on things related to brand communication, public relations, and digital marketing. And so on today's episode, I will be speaking with Mr. Fola Daniel Adelisi. Okay, perfect. So it's nice to have you on board this hour. Thank you for coming and thank you for honoring our call.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, okay. And so, Mr. Fola, I would like to ask you, can you briefly talk about when we say communication, brands comms, what does this mean? And what's really about, when we talk about communication, we have the good communication and then we have the bad communication. But why is it important for brands to dish out good communication?
Okay, so first of all, there's something that people need to understand, that communication is not just the ability to talk and write, which is what distinguishes the professionals from every other human being, because everybody has the ability to talk, everybody has the ability to write. And you would wonder, why then do we need PR professionals? Why then do we need professionals in the communication space and all of that? It's because when we begin to communicate, we first of all have an end game in mind. We have an objective. We have expectations. There are things that we have predetermined even before we began the communication. We plan out the communication process, the engagement process. And that's why you're able to tweak things when things are not going in line with your projections. It's because you have projected outcomes. So if you understand that when it comes to brand communications or being a professional in the comms space, the most important thing that stands you out from every other person that has the ability to write and speak is the ability to plan out outcomes, predetermine outcomes even before you get started. If you don't have pre-planned outcomes before you start something, you're just doing everything you're doing, hoping that they will get you the result that you want, you're not going to get any result. And when you're talking about pre-planned outcomes, it's so detailed to the point of level by level engagement, the channels you're using, the medium of choice, the audience you're trying to communicate with. When I teach communication, for example, maybe business communication, because I facilitate trainings on business communication, one of the things I teach them a lot has to do with an analogy. I say, imagine a name or a lady, for example, let's use Ngozi, born and bred in Lagos, grew up in Lagos, raised in Lagos. Then imagine another Ngozi, born in Nnewi, raised in Nnewi. Everything about her is in one community in Nnewi. Now, as a man, you want to propose to either of them. They are both Ngozi, they are both female, they are both Nigerians. Are you going to communicate with them in exactly the same way? Absolutely not. Why? Because the Ngozi born in Lagos, Nigeria, maybe particularly in Lekki, has a different approach to everything, has a different expectation. So when you talk to the Ngozi in Nnewi and say, oh, I'll buy you flowers, she's wondering what for? She's going to cook vegetables with the flowers for you. But when you talk to the Ngozi in Lekki and you buy her flowers, you say, oh my gosh, he's so romantic. So that tells you that communication is not just knowing what to say and what to write. It's about knowing how to say something to a defined audience and when you should say it. So that's why brand needs to be more strategic, or brands have to be more strategic. when they're trying to communicate. And finally, on that, I'll give you something about the story of one popular company that I heard, which is why brands have to be more deliberate about their comms. Now, this was a case of a brand having a drink, like a canned drink. Somebody was tired, the person was down on the floor. Then the second image shows the same person trying to get up and then has a can of drink in his hand. Then the third image was this person drinking the can of image, and by the fourth image he had gained energy, so he was able to stand up. The projected message was that if you're on the floor, you're weak, you're almost passing out, you take our drink, you're going to get some energy and you get up. They now used exactly the same image in another community, not realizing that in that country, actually, they read from right to left and not from left to right as we do in most parts of the world. So when they saw the image, what they saw was not a man who was down and out, drinking their own drink and gaining energy to be able to stand up. What they saw was a man who was perfectly all right because they were reading from the right, and he drank this drink they were trying to advertise, and because of that went down and passed out. So for them, it means that you should never buy this drink, when the intended message was this is the drink you should buy in order to gain energy. So sometimes, as if you don't understand what brand communication is about, you may be saying exactly the opposite of what your brand intends to say. So that's why brands have to be more strategic and really understand what brand communication is all about, because there's something called perception gap.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I was saying that I've seen that kind of perception as well, that what works for some particular culture works is different to some other set of people, where we had even some corporate materials that works for some certain region was against in some other region. So thank you so much. So I would like to ask you, we want to move a bit into PR, which is public relations. So how do internal communication impact external PR?
So let me quickly say something about PR itself before we talk about how internal PR affects external PR. Now, generally in communication, we say that there are two audiences that you have, and we deliberately use the word audiences. We say there's the internal publics, we refer to people within your organization, and then we refer to the external publics, that is any other person that has interaction with your organization. For example, if you're a politician, your external publics would be anybody ranging from your constituency to the people in the state, people on the road, news media, and all of that. If you're a business owner, it will be anybody buying your products, it will be regulators, anybody who is a customer, basically, essentially visitors, tourists, everybody who may need your product. So the first thing you need to understand about PR is that it's not a tool to wait to use when you're in crisis alone. PR, public relations, is about perception management. Either you build the perception first by yourself and manage the perception, or you have to start managing the perception after crisis, which you most likely refer to as damage control. The unfortunate part is that most PR people or most organizations do is to make sure that you have an in-house PR person who manages your perception before you get to the crisis stage. And I'll give you an example. This is out there in the public. You remember Hilda Bassi, and you remember her
Yes,
cookathon. Why was it
of
more
course.
successful than every other cookathon that people attempted, either before her own or after her own? There were other people who attempted to, break some form of Guinness World Record, but we didn't even hear about them. And they actually broke the records. One major thing that stood out for Hilda Bassi was public relations. She didn't just wait and hope that somebody was going to find out about the event. I was privileged to meet the young lady that managed her PR campaign. So there was a strategic PR campaign before the event started, while the event was going on, and after the event. They predetermined outcomes. So I just needed to put that out there. You create and you manage perceptions even before you're in crisis. Now let's come to how, which is your question, how internal public relations affects external public relations. Number one, if you have if you work in an organization, for example, that has multiple agencies or you lead an organization that has multiple departments, multiple agencies, each department most likely having maybe the powers to communicate directly with the public on some matters. You are going to run into trouble if there is no synergy and if you don't communicate in a synchronized manner. So, take for example, Lagos State as an example. I'm not saying so, whatever I say is not being specific, it's just an example. Lagos
Okay.
State has several agencies, they have several
Mhm.
parastatals, they have several ministries. Take, for example, the federal government. And the reason the state or the federal government are more appropriate in this case is because we're currently in a crisis management situation going by the protests, which in the media they refer to end bad governance protest or the end the August protest. One of the things we saw, let's even take our minds back to the NSAS protest. One of the major crises of that protest was miscommunication and communication not in sync from different agencies of the same government. So you have to determine first of all who has the authority to say what, who has the permission to say what, and all the people internally you have to be communicating with yourselves and determine who can go and say what and who cannot go there and say what. When you agree on that and you carry everybody along, the moment someone is going to speak for your organization outside of that organization, we're going to be hearing exactly the same thing when another person gets the chance to say so. For example, imagine that the military is saying something, the police is saying another thing, NSCDC is saying something else, Federal Road Safety is saying another thing, and then in Lagos, if it's a Lagos issue, LASMA is saying something completely different. They all report to one man, and that's the governor
Mhm.
of the state.
Mhm.
There's the Ministry of Information, who is, I mean, the commissioner in charge of the Ministry of Information is the chief spokesperson of the state, whether you like it or not. So if he doesn't take the responsibility of coordinating that communication, as far as I'm concerned, regardless of who controls those agencies, that is still internal communication for them. So they need to manage and synchronize their comms because if they don't, LASMA speaks separately, the Ministry of Information is saying another thing. Maybe LTV, which is some they like to think they are private, but we all know that they are still responsible to the state government. They are saying something else. How do you think that Lagosians will perceive them? So from the
Continue.
outside, we see there is crisis internally because there is no internal synchronization. So it doesn't
Mhm.
take long. It just comes to the proverb that says, "A house divided against itself will fall." Do you
Mhm.
know? And it's a strategy. Take, for example, maybe you're traveling with somebody and you don't have sincere intentions. You've come up with several stories and all of that, and you get to the embassy. One of the things immigrations officials would do is to put the two of you, maybe three of you, in separate rooms. Then they listen to you separately, listen to this one separately, listen to that one separately. When your stories don't add up, they don't have to ask questions again. They know that you are all up to something because all three of you are telling different stories. And unfortunately, that's what happens when internal communications is not successful. It's going to reflect on external communications. So that's what happens with state government. The one agency cannot agree with the other agency, or the other agency is saying, no, we're superior, we're better, we have more funding. So your internal battles, your internal debacle is going to affect being united to communicate with your external public, which is why you must be very careful to make sure that there's no internal politics as far as your communication is concerned. At least that's one major thing among others that we can talk about.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Okay, so I'm going to go quick to the next question, which is also on PR. So let's look at PR. A good and effective story is needed for PR most times. So, but
Absolutely.
they are always different. I mean, different angles to a story. So, how
Yeah.
do you determine the side or the best angle to pick in different stories? Considering trying to paint a good public image.
Okay, so here's one thing that we need to first of all connect to. Public relations is an offshoot of journalism. And when I was studying mass communication, one of the things we were told or taught in news writing and reporting is that there are quite a number of elements that allows a story to make the news. And one of such elements is the human angle. If a story is going to make the news, it will have to have an human angle to it. If there is no human angle to it, it won't make the news. Now, they also told us that bad news is news anytime, any day. Good news is not news, which explains why bad news will sell faster than good news. But if the good news, for example, connects to the human angle, let's say, for example, Mr. President wakes up today and says tomorrow every Nigerian is going to get a 1 million naira credit alert in their bank account. Now that's good news and it connects to us. It will make the news because of the human angle. What's the human angle? Everybody is already talking about suffering, how they don't have enough cash and all of that. And the president wakes up to say you're going to get 1 million naira in your accounts tomorrow. And not just tomorrow, before December, I'm going to give you a Christmas gift. You get 1.5 million naira in all your accounts again. What do you think is going to happen? No matter what this president does, just hearing that alone, and if he fulfills that obligation, that's if he makes it and fulfills that obligation, just imagine how people are going to respond. So the human angle to every story is very, very important. Now, apart from the human angle, the next thing is which audience are you communicating with? And that takes me back to the first two people that I used, the Ngozi in Lekki and the Ngozi in Inewi. You must think of number one, the human angle, then number two, what audience am I communicating with? Which then takes me to the story of John and Latin. There's this story that says that, or there's a proverb actually, then connects to a story that says that if you must teach John Latin, you must know how to speak Latin and you must know John. It's one thing to know how to speak Latin and be able to teach Latin. If, for example, you want to teach me Latin and you don't know me, the only thing you will succeed at is teaching Latin, but you may not be able to teach me. Why is that? It's because you don't know how I respond to knowledge. You don't know the best way to impart knowledge into me, and you don't know when you are overstretching me. But if you know me so well, you know how I study, you know my patterns, you know if I'm an audiovisual person, and you know the stories will connect with me, then it becomes easier for you to teach me Latin. But until you know who I am, you may be very good at Latin, you may be the best, but you still may not be able to teach me Latin, which is why a lot of mathematics teachers are failing at teaching their students mathematics. They know the subject, no doubt, but they can't transfer that knowledge because most times they don't know the students they're dealing with and they don't know what works for them. So, which angle works best? Think about the human angle. How will human beings respond naturally when they hear this? Then, number two, what's the audience? Then, number three, what brand am I trying to sell? Let's take, for example, you want to sell, let's say, a luxury car brand. I don't want to mention any name, but just think of the premium 1% of the 1%, those kind of cars that are not available on the car lot. They don't even advertise or they hardly do. But you want maybe the king in Saudi Arabia. So you can imagine the kind of cars I'm talking about. You want the Sultan of Sokoto, you want the Oni of Ife, or you want the president of Nigeria or the US president to buy those cars. How do you tell the story of that kind of car to such people? Because number one, you know that money is not an issue. Number two, you know that they're not thinking about fuel efficiency when they're thinking about such cars. So what you're selling to them is status. Whatever story you're going to sell to them must be crafted around status, luxury, what it means to them, the kind of image it projects when they drive in such cars. So that's the angle from which you tell the story. And why are you telling that story from that angle? Number one is because of the audience. Number two is because of the car brand. The car brand itself is about luxury. And the people, the target market is about luxury, is about the affluent. So if you're selling to a market that simply wants to buy affluence, regardless of what it costs, then your story must be crafted around affluence, opulence, wealth. But if you're talking to people who want to buy functionality, you can't sell Rolls Royce to somebody who wants to buy functionality. You can't sell an SUV with a V8 engine to somebody who wants to buy functionality. Somebody who wants to buy functionality is thinking of a four-plug engine. The smaller cars that on 5 liters, you can go 100 kilometers. That's what those ones are looking for. Do you get? So both of them they are cars. Are they not cars? They are both cars. But one car is about showing strength and status on the road and maybe speed. But the other car is simply about how far I can travel and still have to buy very little fuel. So the angle would depend on, let's call it a triangle. Number one is the human angle. Number two is the audience. Number three is the product itself or the service itself. Was it designed for opulence or was it designed to scale? If it's designed to scale, then you're thinking about numbers. You're not thinking about, oh, let me just sell to a few people. Let me now connect it to real estate and I'll end on that note for this question. So let's say, similar to what I said earlier, you want to sell a house in Lekki or you want to sell a house in Ikorodu. They are both houses. They both serve the same basic functions, but they will only be bought by different kinds of people. So if you want to craft a story around a house in Lekki, that's where you see people in Lekki saying things like ocean view. To somebody who is in Ikorodu, what's his business with ocean view? As a matter of fact, if you try to sell ocean view to somebody in Ikorodu, his headache is I hope water will not come and bring down my house. I hope crocodiles will not come out of no, because he's thinking about, let me just sleep and maybe have a few other tenants in my house and that's it. Let me make some extra money. But the other person in that place wants to show off to his clients and say, look, I'm of a different breed. So who you're trying to market to and what product you're selling will also determine the angle. So three things: human angle, audience, the product or the service itself will determine the angle that is most suitable for what you're trying to sell.
All right, thank you so much for that. That's I would just say very accurate. That's what I can say. Okay, so let's look at some of the mistakes, common mistakes that we've had a lot of issues when it comes to brand communications. And so let's look at those common mistakes. What are the common mistakes that people or brands make when it comes to communications, and especially in their core messages? And can you provide helpful tips to help eradicate this? So let's look at the common mistakes, and then you can then mention tips to help, eradicate this kind of mistakes.
First of all, as you were asking, I simply remembered a story that went out last year around Easter period, and I think something, unfortunately, some other brands made similar mistakes during Easter period again this year. So the first one, I think last year, they were trying to promote their brand, which is not connected to bread, and they said something,
Mhm.
he has risen like agege bread.
Yes.
Then another brand this year trying to promote their milk actually showed the nail being pierced into the milk and the milk gushing out as though the milk was
The blood.
representative of the blood. Now,
Mhm.
why were those two terrible campaigns? They were both terrible campaigns for two reasons. Number one, religious consideration and cultural intelligence. Now, when you're actually doing a PR campaign or you're representing a brand and you're planning their public relations, one of the things you must consider is any community that has multicultural contexts or multi-religious contexts. Once there are multicultural contexts, you don't want to do a campaign that is heavier on one side than the other. If there are multi-religious contexts, you don't want to do a campaign that seems to tilt with the language of choice for one religion or towards one religion compared to the others, except, of course, it's a product strictly targeted to a particular religion. If it is not a product strictly targeted to a particular religion, there's no reason why you should make that terrible mistake. One of the things you need to do is, if you don't speak another thing is language, purely language. Now, there's a difference between culture, religion, and language. Sometimes they are interwoven, but they are still the biggest mistakes some people are making because we are in the business of communication. If you don't speak the language, find somebody who does. When you find somebody who does, not just somebody who does, somebody who speaks the language and also understands the profession. Is one thing for them to understand the language, is another thing for them to understand the profession. So you need to find that blend. When you find that and you create a campaign, the person becomes like your consultant and vets what you're doing to make sure that what you're about to push out is the exact thing that appeals to their community. If it is not, then tweak it until you find something that appeals to their culture, that appeals to their language, and that appeals to their religion without offending them. Now, the same organization that sent out the campaign saying he's risen like agege bread, they could have done something other than comparing his rising to agege bread. Then the other one that also sent out a campaign comparing his blood flowing to milk. They could have also done something other than comparing his blood to milk. But they actually, I think maybe they didn't do enough consultation. That's one thing. Then, number two, when they came up with that kind of campaign, my question is who vetted the campaign? Because it's one thing to design a campaign, it's another thing to vet the campaign before it goes out or before you execute. Did you not have a team to vet it? I'm assuming that the head of communications, the head of the PR unit, is not the one involved in designing the campaign, which means that when they design, they then bring it to his desk, he approves. So how can you, as head of PR, approve that kind of campaign? It beats my imagination. So you need to, even when you think something is good enough, it's always good to get a second opinion about something, particularly because as a PR person, you are a consultant to that organization. Even when you're not a consultant, even if you're an internal PR person, don't say, I know my organization too well. I know this is what we want. That's one of the biggest mistakes of internal PR guys. They think they know the organization and then know what the public wants from them. That's a mistake. So, number one, I said, don't make the mistake of cultural context. Make sure that you're conscious. We keep talking about emotional intelligence these days. There's cultural or native intelligence as well, which means you understand this culture and you can connect with them so well. Then, number two is the language. Language is very, very important. You can't go to the north now. You want to do a campaign successfully in the north, and you're playing the campaign in English, or you're doing your entire PR campaign is designed in English. It is what you call dead on arrival. They understand English, no doubt, but the language is where they connect. So speak their language. That's number one. Then number three, I said is I said called multicultural, multi-religious, and language. So religion is a very sensitive matter in Nigeria. If you go to America, you go to the UK, it's no longer as sensitive as it is in Nigeria. But when you're dealing with stuff and people in Nigeria and you're designing campaigns, if you can stay away from religion, make sure your campaign is devoid of it. But if you cannot design something that is devoid of religion, then make sure that you are strictly within the acceptable range of not abusing people and not making it look like you are favoring one religion above the other. So that's very important. Then, apart from the culture, language, and the religion, one other thing that I think people make mistakes about is, you remember that we referred to audience earlier. Don't assume you know your audience until you have actually done some investigations. Then find out. Don't forget, you're also not the first person to do a campaign for that audience. Try and look at the campaigns of other brands within that community, maybe other brands, other products, something that is completely unrelated, or any PR action that has been taken in that community. What worked for that campaign? How did they execute successfully? Until you find those things, you're not looking at their specific actions, you're looking for their strategy. Let's say, for example, think about telecoms. When telecoms first came into Nigeria, what was the campaign of the last person to come in, and how did they engage? Of course, in telecom space, we know MTN. We know at that point in time we used to call them maybe Econet. Then we had Glo come into the space. How did Glo break into the market? The USP of Glo was pay per second. And up until they came on board, everybody told us that pay per second was not possible. But Glo came in, they didn't only say pay per second, they now projected themselves as the telecoms company of the country. They then created colors, even though their color is not necessarily green, they created colors that blended into the Nigerian colors and also brought indigenous campaigns to help people connect as they should. So, one major thing they did was they looked at what the challenge was in the market and launched into the market by proffering a solution for the existing challenge, which is if I call for 30 seconds, I'm still paying for 1 minute. If I make, remember, some of us were students then, we try to call your parents, and then you have to rush your conversation and make sure that it doesn't exceed 1 minute so that you can only pay 20 naira for the phone call. And the moment it exceeds 1 minute, if it's 1 minute, 2 seconds, you have to pay for the 2 minutes and you're regretting, okay, so why didn't I just talk for the 2 minutes? But unfortunately, there's not. So they came into the market solving a physical and obvious problem and launched their entire campaign around that problem. So when you're coming, make sure that you are not creating a campaign around a perceived problem. It has to be an obvious problem with a solution that you have provided. So that's one way to go. But don't beat about the bush. Don't. PR is not about fancy communication.
Yes.
PR is not fancy communication. PR is being specific. Solve a problem. Tell the people who you are, what you represent, what to expect from you, and let them see that that is exactly what they are getting when they get your products or services. So it's very important to communicate effectively in that regard. So what other mistake? Yeah. So the final mistake, which unfortunately we have to deal with these days, is that people think that because they have access to social media, they now understand PR. It's a crazy thing these days. Everybody is an influencer.
Yeah.
Everybody, so long, you've forgotten that some of these people who call themselves influencers are even paying for those subscribers that you're seeing. So somebody has 300,000 followers and you believe that they are influencers and they will get your message out there. So you go and give them they know nothing about PR, they know nothing about advertising, they know nothing about strategic communication. You've handed your product over to them, they mess it up. Then you think, oh, they can make it go viral. You're simply concerned about virality and not integrity. You need to be more conscious of integrity compared to going viral. Of course, going viral would mean that more people know your product and they should eventually buy it, but be more conscious of the integrity of the product. So you're going out there now, it's a two-way thing. If you don't understand communication, don't simply because you have a lot of followership online assume that you now understand how PR and comms works. The least you can do is to take some training. I know that the Institute of Public Relations, which I'm a member of, still does a number of trainings, short courses, and stuff like that for everybody who wants. So you now understand how to manage campaigns. Then number two, this one is a bigger mistake on the part of the companies because they don't want to pay a lot of money, because they are trying to, they say we're on a do they say shoestring budget, or we're trying to bootstrap. They don't want to pay the professionals. So they just pay people who seem to have a lot of attention online. And when the real problem comes, they now want to come back to the professionals and expect the professionals to accept peanuts, haven't paid somebody else so much to mess up so many things. Now,
Okay.
then there's another popular company that sold a product. I don't want to mention names so I don't get into trouble myself. And then a young lady did a review online and got into trouble just for doing a honest, or what she felt was a honest review of that brand. Number one, the owner of that company shouldn't have been the PR face of that company at the same time. It
Yeah.
was a no. Then
Yeah.
because there's no way your emotions will not be involved. Then number
True.
two, they were not addressing the concerns of the lady. They were simply focused on attacking the lady,
The lady.
which in itself is communication to the public. They thought that by attacking the lady, they were dealing with a problem. They didn't understand that attacking the lady meant you were creating more problem. The more you attack somebody for saying something, the more you validate what they are saying. That's how communication works. If somebody says something and it is not true, You simply debunk it and leave it at that. In fact, sometimes there's a strategy in PR that occasionally we let it play out. But sometimes there are some issues you don't let them play out. You simply debunk and show other people. If the same lady could have even been converted to a brand ambassador.
So are we, because you've already started taking in tips on how to really manage this crisis. I mean, how to really put out communication rightly. So I think we should just bring in the tips and the helpful tips using these examples
Okay.
as well.
Okay, so the first thing is, like I said, if I was to manage that situation, it's the same lady I would use to actually debunk the very things that she said about my brand. So I'll bring her in, I would ask her to try other products, see exactly what the products were designed for. And, of course, there'll be media ops, there'll be press conferences, or there'll be stories, videos around to show that she actually came in, not that we coerced her to come in, and then would cook some stuff with the same products she tried to use, and then cook something else with other products and ask her to do a public review. When the brand now sees that it's the same person who criticized your product that you brought in, the first thing they will say to you is that you are a listener. They say that, oh, we appreciate people like that. It means that you are listening. So there are times when people criticize you, your critics can become your best advertisers. That's my tip, actually. But the way you manage it is, don't see everybody criticizing you as an enemy. The same person criticizing you can be turned around and used as your advertiser. What do you think? If there's anything politicians know so well, it's this particular tip. Somebody criticizes the government so much, after a while they just tell the person, oh God, stop talking, we'll give you an appointment. And then they give the person an appointment. You say, but you used to criticize this government, why are you no longer talking? And then the person says to you, it's bad manner to talk while eating. So it's very important to understand this strategy. The same person criticizing you can become your best advertiser. Then the other thing, the other tip is what I said about the owner of the company being the PR face. If you are not a PR person and you're running a company, avoid being the PR face of your company. It's a bad idea, because you definitely, even if you're going to be the PR face of your company, you need to make sure that you're working with a strategic PR team, guiding your conversations, telling you things to do, what to do, how to do it, how to respond in certain situations which may not be in alignment with how you really want to respond, but they know how to elicit certain reactions from the audience. So that's one very important thing. Now, let me turn around and just give another example. There was a gentleman who is in the business of father. And what happened was that somebody went to his store and had a terrible experience in the store. So this guy came online and says, oh, I don't know what's the fuse about this guy. There's nothing so special. After all, I went to his store. I had a terrible experience with the staff. They even sold me something that looks like a stale or father rice with some stones in it. When this guy posted that and mentioned the name of the brand, guess what the owner of the business did? The owner of the business said, please DM me. I would like to know more about exactly what happened and how to resolve it. So this guy sent a personal message to the owner, and the guy resolved it and even invited him to come back for another meal and taste and see how it looks like. So he actually took his time, responded personally to the person that was involved, and addressed the concern. So that leads me to the second tip, beyond just converting your critics to your advertisers. The second thing is engagement. If you're not willing to engage, there's no way you can convert your critics to your advertisers. So an engagement is very critical. And beyond you're not just engaging to show people that you're engaging, you're engaging to set the stories straight, to tell your own angle of the story. We were talking about angles earlier. There are certain things that customers see from a perspective, but if you bring them in, they are now on the inside. They are not just customers anymore. They can see how you operate. So bring them in, show them what your process is, and then let them go and tell other people, oh, when I went to greet him, this is what I saw. And guess what that guy did after having the interaction with the owner of the father business? He came back online and said, guys, update, I'm really sorry. I've spoken with the MD and this is what he said. I understand that it's just one of the staff trying to spoil his business. So The first thing is he knew that he had to convert a critic to an advertiser. The second thing is that he knew he had to engage. Then the third thing is he had to bring them in. Not they shouldn't stay as outsiders. Bring them on the inside. Let them see a bit of you. That might lead to vulnerability. How do you think people tell their stories and turn things around in the courtroom? How do you think that people who commit a crime sometimes get away with the crime in front of the jury? They become vulnerable so that the jury can believe them. So, to an extent, if you're a PR practitioner or a brand, one of the things you have to do is to allow a bit of vulnerability so that the people you're dealing with can understand you. So, those are three things I think would help on the general level. Most of the other things you want to do can come under either converting converting a critic to an advertiser, engagement, and bringing them from the outside to become insiders.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Femi. That was quite insightful. So I want to quickly ask, how should brands prepare for potential PR crisis? Because I know most times when it comes to brands, they don't foresee all of these things. I'm going to give you an example. There was this person that went to the store and was reviewing products. So he took this particular product, review it, but it was a negative review. So these are some of the likely crises that a lot of brands are not prepared for. So as a PR practitioner and a brand communication specialist, how would you advise a brand to prepare for crisis, PR crisis?
So the first thing, I think the answer to that question has been answered to an extent in what I said earlier. Remember, I said that you can turn critics to advertisers. If somebody gives a bad review to your product, now one of the stories I would come out with, particularly if the product is new, I have an advantage. What's the advantage that I have? I would simply respond immediately under that and say, thank you for your feedback. You have just contributed immensely to our study in order to come up with a better product, which will be launching on so date. The moment I say that kind of a thing, you have shown that number one, you're a listener. You have shown that number two, you are simply testing the market. Even if what you were doing is not really to test the market, it's one of the ways to respond to say, look, we're testing the market. Of course, you won't say you were testing the market, because if the product has to do with consumption, if it's something that people consume, if they're edible products, it would appear that you're putting people's lives at risk. So you can't say that you're testing the market. So let's say it's a gadget, for example. Then you can simply respond by, look, we appreciate all the things that you have said. Fantastic review that you have given us. In fact, we really like your honest feedback, and you have given us some valuable information to put into consideration when bringing up the next product. And again, I'll go back to engagement. Engage the person who did the criticism. Ask them to come and review the next thing you're doing. Let's say, for example, it's a phone that you're about to do. You're coming out with you have a phone out there. The person says your phone is bad, it's terrible, but this person still took time to do a review. The first angle to look at it from is that some people didn't know about your product until this person did the review. So this person has given you some form of publicity. Ride on the wings of that publicity to say, we appreciate this particular phone is designed for this set of people. If somebody reviews a phone, as an example, they are most likely going to, these days, what do you think they will criticize? They'll criticize the camera of the phone, right? They'll criticize the battery life of the phone. After camera and battery life, what else are they going to criticize? Most likely aesthetics, function, beauty, and all that. So if your phone is not fine, if your phone doesn't have a long battery life and doesn't have heavy camera, why would somebody criticize this? Or how do you respond if somebody criticizes it? You say, thank you. You notice that yes, it's not the camera, the phone is not heavy on camera, it's not heavy on battery, and it's not heavy on aesthetics. One of the reasons we have designed this kind of phone is that we want the older generation, we want grannies, we want grandpas to have a feel of the smartphone without the burdens of heavy battery, camera, and stuff like that, which would then put a dent into their pockets. That explains why our phones are pocket friendly. Initially, the person came out condemning the phone, saying that it's cheap, it's not heavy, it can't do much. But you have responded to show that there is an advantage to that phone. You have said it is pocket friendly, it serves a particular target audience. You're simply saying that we're producing cheap phones, but without saying it. You're also simply
Mm.
saying that our phone is not for everybody, but you have not said
Mhm.
it is not for everybody. You have
Yes.
shown them the target, that kind of. So
Audience.
it's a
You've
simple.
mentioned the target audience. Yes.
Exactly. So one
Mm.
of the ways you respond to criticisms is tell them this product is not for you without saying that it is not for them. Find a way to
Mhm.
craft it and say this is our target audience, which is why I understand if you don't feel the same about our target audience who have been proven to show.
Mhm.
And one of the other things is most of us don't take testimonials seriously. If
Mm.
there's anything that people take seriously in other parts of the world, is testimonials. If you're
Yes.
sending out products, do your reviews, not just on paper, because everybody believes that anybody can generate testimonial on paper. These
Mhm.
days, everybody can do a 1 minute video about your product and stuff like that. You can even send.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, when they don't even have a PR team, how are they going to have a research team? If you have a PR team, you have a research team, you can tell your research team, go into the market, do a survey, get feedback about our products, send it to the PR team. So the PR team knows how to push out our communication about any other thing that we're doing. So they need that kind of a thing. Do feedback, get testimonials, put it out there and let people know. Guess what one of the telecoms organizations has been doing for years now. Everybody has been complaining about how terrible their network is, how slow
Mm.
their speed. But guess what they're doing? They started focusing on campus. So they've been going from one campus, the one I'm talking about. I don't want to mention names,
Yes,
but
I do.
they
I
just,
do.
yeah. So they just started focusing on campuses, and guess what? Those guys on campus are enjoying their services. So it's those of us outside of campus that are not enjoying their services. We are complaining, and it looks like they don't care, but they still have a
Mhm.
target audience, which is why they are still in
Mm.
business. So
Yeah.
one of the ways to respond to criticism is show them we have a target audience and we're meeting. No matter what you say, Apple is not going to bring down the price of their products.
Of course.
And guess what? Apple is the only company that doesn't do mid-range, high range, and low range.
No.
Everything is premium. But if you
Mhm.
come to Samsung has they have what they call the entry level phone, they have the mid-range phone, and they have the premium series. You go to
Mhm.
other brand phones too, they have different categories. But as far as Apple is concerned, there's nothing like mid-range, there's nothing, everything is premium.
Sure.
So they have sold that premium mentality to their customers, and that's what all the most of the Apple buyers anyway, that's what most of them are buying. It's the status. That's what they're selling. Luxury is what Apple sells, not functionality.
Okay. Okay, thank you so
So
much for that. What are the latest platforms, technologies? We have different platforms now that
yeah,
are available to businesses and brands. We
yeah,
have the AI, we have
yeah,
different other platforms as well.
yeah.
So, can you talk to us about platforms that are useful or that you can recommend for brand
Okay.
communication?
First of all, you've mentioned AI, and I was going to mention AI as well. But before we go to AI, let's just say that use social media effectively. There are too many brands that are not using social media effectively. There are so many brands that are still not in the effective communication space. Let me refer you to what CNN does. Have you watched a story break on CNN and watched the same story break on Nigerian television stations? Now, most times, if it breaks on Nigerian television stations, you hear the story maybe in the morning, and at best, if it's a really big story, you hear it at night on the 10 o'clock news, right? But when you watch the same story break on CNN, how did they work on that story? You notice that apart from reading it in the news, then they have a panel immediately talking about it. Then another show starts. The next set of presenters and guests are talking about the same story from different angles. Then the next show, it's the same story they're still talking about. But despite the fact that you are listening to the same story for more than 2 3 hours on CNN, on BBC, you realize that you don't get tired of it. Why is it that you don't get tired of listening to exactly the same headline, but different people analyzing it? Just think about, I don't know if you saw the coronation of King Charles. Just think about the coronation of King Charles on BBC and on CNN. Then they will be giving you his history, when the mother was born, how the mother is the longest reigning monarch, how Prince
Mhm.
Charles has been waiting so long for this moment. So they are building stories from the angle of his expectation, building story from the angle of it is now his time. What is he going to do? What are his
Mhm.
expectations? And they have so much to say, but they are still
Yeah.
talking about one man. The
Mhm.
only thing they are
And
still
same
talking about is
event.
what? Coronation. Is the same
Mhm.
event. So a brand must learn to do the same thing for his product or services, which is what most of us have not come to be able to do about our products and services. Use social media effectively. You don't have to be on all the platforms. Just pick the most strategic platforms. LinkedIn is
Mhm.
strategic, Instagram is strategic, Facebook is still very relevant. It's still the biggest platform, whether we like it or not, considering the
Mhm.
fact that they bought over Instagram and they bought over WhatsApp. So face and they now have threads. So Facebook is still a very formidable platform. So use social media across board. Newsletters have not become outdated. To some
Mhm.
audience, it may be, and they may not read it, but newsletters are not yet outdated. In flight magazines, there are still strategies you must leverage. Guess what? When you sell a product in flight, what audience
Mhm.
do you think you're trying to reach out to? You're trying to
Mhm.
reach out to a higher percent. I don't want to use the higher, a smaller percentage of the country that
Mhm.
most likely can afford what you're trying to sell.
Yes.
Because if somebody is flying and comes across your product in the airplane, they are most likely the kind of people who will not think of and say, "Oh, this money, instead of me flying, I bet let me go and catch if it's in a chuku." So you
True.
clearly know that you are dealing with people who are in a certain strata of the society, which is why
True.
in-flight magazine is strategic. Magazines in hotels and stuff is still very strategic. Those are some of the things, good old strategies that still work up until date. Then
Mhm.
uh, use AI effectively. There's a website. It's called there's an AI for that.com. There is an AI for that.com. In other words, you go on this website, you're looking for AI for brand, you're looking for AI for PR, AI for any other thing. Just go to there is an AI for that.
Dot
Put in whatever
com.
it is that you want. Yes, whatever it is that you want to do, ask this AI, oh, is there something for this? Then it will show you what is available. Why is it that you need to use AI tools? Number one, I think that you need to use AI tools to analyze some situation. Let me give you an example of how I sometimes use AI tools. So I write something that I want to post
Mhm.
on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and maybe Threads. I've written it, I realize that this thing feels very formal. I'm not a Gen Z, I'm a millennial. And
Mhm.
unconsciously, I think that those of us who are millennials don't even know that whether we like it or not, the Gen Zs see us as old people, even though we are not. So I wrote something that seemed very official. I then took that text, I posted it in Chat GPT, and then gave
Mhm.
Chat GPT the instruction. I said, please revise or rewrite what I've written using my exact words, but make it acceptable for social media platforms.
Mhm.
In other words, it's not Chat GPT that wrote it, I wrote it.
Mhm.
But I want it rewritten in such a way that it connects with Gen Zs. So when I
Yes.
posted it there, ChatGPT now had to rewrite what I wrote using some terms that were funkier,
Mhm.
things to connect with. So when
Relatable
I
to the
got it,
Gen Z.
relatable with the Gen Zs, exactly. Using some icons, some emojis that I don't know where to get them from. I don't know how to create them, but it created it for me. So I just copied
Mhm.
it and posted it on all my platforms. And those things will create more engagement. So that's one of the things that we can sometimes throw around. PR people must not forget that a large part of the percentage of the people you're communicating with online, they are not the good old folks that you're communicating with online. They are there, but they are not your primary audience. If you're going to use the internet as a form of communication, you can use TV for formal communication for those ones.
Mhm.
But you use Chat GPT, use AI to redraft what you're doing to be able to connect with the younger generation. Now, the other thing is use AI for your videos. These days, one of the easiest things to do is to have transcriptions on your screen when your video is going on. Before, you would have to give that to a video editor who is most likely going to mess it up if the guy's English is not good. You can spell certain things or you can say certain things the editor misspells. That's, many of us we criticized Nollywood a lot for this. Wait until you have to do content creation and you have to, put screen captions by yourself. That's when you know that job is not easy. However, AI can do this effortlessly for you. So, what is the purpose of this? It allows people to follow. It has been written that, there's a research that most people don't even play video online with volume, because sometimes they're in a place where they cannot play the video with a volume. But if there are captions, they can simply look at the captions and they understand everything that you're trying to say. Then have an added language. I did something a few weeks back. I was teaching a group of facilitators how to use artificial intelligence or how to integrate artificial intelligence into their training stuff. And one of the things that we did was we weren't just doing captions. I now used a platform. Just imagine this interview now. You cut out a portion of it and you put it into that AI app. I've forgotten the name. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying so hard to remember it, but if I do, I'll put it out there. And the video comes back with you and I speaking French. Even though we both cannot speak French, we both have never spoken French before, but you can use it to translate to French. So why is this an important tool for PR practitioners? Your job sometimes extends beyond your immediate audience, which may be an English-speaking community. You can then connect with maybe a French-speaking community. I don't know if they have something for the Hausa-speaking community already, but it will be as though, I'm not talking about French captions, though. There are French captions, you can have that. But it's as if I am the one speaking French and I don't know how to speak French. So there are apps for that. Use it to engage with a broader audience, particularly if your organization is a multinational organization. So use social media effectively, use artificial intelligence effectively. More importantly, put into context culture, religion, and language. Those are very important. But social media and artificial, then make sure that you're up to date with the latest trends on social media. For example, a lot of people think that once something goes out there on social media, they think it's viral. They think everybody has heard about it. We're being delusional about the capacity of social media to an extent. Do you know why I say we're being delusional about the capacity of social media? Check the data. Ask questions. How many Nigerians are on social media or on Facebook? You'll be shocked that the figure is not as impressive as we imagine. Then the other thing you need to consider is when you're talking about number of active phone lines in Nigeria, don't forget that most Nigerians still have like 2-3 lines or even more. And it's easier to have 2-3 lines because most phones have 2 SIM slots. So if you do a research and they tell you have 150 million active phone lines, and you put into consideration all the people that use 2 phone lines, including me, guilty as charged, you would realize that we probably don't have up to, maybe we probably may not have up to 75 million active phone lines. It's the same thing on social media. Some people have multiple accounts. So if they tell you that this is the number of people that are active online. In Nigeria, for example, Lagos is the busiest eco space on social media. And understandably so. Is it somebody you're putting something on social media, you think you have reached everybody? Is it the mama in Akure inside one village that is focused on how to eat breakfast and she has to go to the farm before she gets her breakfast that comes on social media? Even some young people outside of Lagos are not on social media because outside of Lagos, it's not a priority for them. For those of us in Lagos, social media is one of the ways in which we get by on a daily basis. It's as if social media is the air we breathe for those of us in Lagos. But outside of Lagos, you'll be shocked at the number of people that are active. So if you want to do a PR campaign that is not centered on Lagos alone, that is about the whole of Nigeria, social media cannot be your only metric to determine the success of the campaign. So stay abreast. And the reason this is important is so that you don't mislead or misinform your clients or your organization, making them believe that you have done a successful campaign whereas you have not penetrated any market at all. So you need to have a multi approach to every campaign. You have the social
Okay.
media approach to the campaign. You have the offline, they say the
Mhm.
offline and online approach to every campaign. So that's one of the things that we must not get to the point where we're so delusional. We think that so long as you've engaged social media, then we're good. Except, of course, if social media is where your audience is. But if that's not the
Mhm.
case, let's not be delusional.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Fola. Okay, so
Yeah.
before I let you go, I would just want to pop this last question. Of course, we have different brands. We have the B2C, we have the B2B, and we even have the B2G, which is the brands to the government.
Yeah.
Now, if I want to tap into your knowledge, permit us to tap into your knowledge a bit. What are the tips or what are the advice that you're going to give brands, especially the B2B and the B2G, considering the fact that they're not reaching out to, consumers, which usually when you're doing or when you're involved in an end product, that is used by the consumer, you can reach out directly to the consumers. But now you're reaching out to another brand, you're reaching out to government, which consists of different set of people. So what are the kind of brand communication platforms or what would I say, tips that brands that are into B2B and B2G can leverage on?
I'm not sure of trends right now, but let me put a tip out there.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that I have a very let me I can refer to him as a mentor. He
Okay.
said he went out to do he's in the advertising space, and of course, PR advertising, they're interwoven. So he
Yeah.
said he wanted to do a campaign for a bank, one of the defunct banks in Nigeria. And as they were trying to do something, the bank manager said something. He said, appeal to their greed. Appeal to their greed. We must appeal to their greed. Everybody has a form of greed or the other.
Mm.
Now, that at first that did not sink well, but later I understood so much what he was talking about. And I've mentioned a bit about it when I said, what do you think that those luxury brands are marketing to you? Or what do you think that Apple is selling to you? Now, how does this apply to whether it's B2C, B2B, or B2G? Now, if it's a business trying to sell directly to a customer, sometimes, depending on the audience, you know that your customer wants to save money. You can sell to them on the grounds that, look, okay, let me be a bit more practical. When
Okay.
the prices of flour started going up, the natural response of most bakeries was to increase the prices of bread, isn't it? A
Mm-hmm.
smart bakery would have done something else, which is what many other big brands are doing. Instead of increasing the price of bread, what they should have done is to strategically reduce the quantity and retain the price.
Fine.
If you reduce strategically the quantity over time and retain the price, customers may not initially notice, and even when they eventually do, they will not complain because they're still paying the same price for the
Mm-hmm.
product. So it doesn't feel like they're having to pay more for it.
Okay.
Now, let me also confirm how I know that it is what so many brands have been doing. Just think of all the beverages that we took while we were growing up.
Yeah.
Today, you go to a supermarket, you buy the same beverage, it's far more expensive. But when you open the beverage and you tear it open, the beverage is actually almost half of the container.
Mm-hmm.
How come it's half of the container when the price has greatly increased? So
Mm.
what they have done over time is they didn't immediately increase the prices. They actually kept the quantity lower, and we kept buying up until one day you just open one of them, you just say, this is just half now. What's going on here? So one of the appeal to their greed. Now, if you're trying to market something to government, if there's anything any government wants, any
Mm-hmm.
government at all, if there's anything they want, is to look good in front of their people.
Yeah.
That is one. So if you're whatever you're selling to government, the question you must answer effectively is, how does it make this government look good? That's what you must sell to them. So if you are able to successfully sell to them how this service, how this product, how this idea makes them look good, or how can it help them secure second term, how can it help them make their party look like they're a better party, forget it, the idea will fly. So long as it makes them look good, it will fly. Government does not buy logic, just as most customers do not buy logic. For example, when we buy phones, most times we don't just think of buying a phone that helps us make phone calls. You want to buy a phone that helps you make a statement, which is why when you're making a phone call, you put your hand, a finger behind the phone that allows the camera of the phone to show and tell the people, look, my phone is not ordinary. Look at the camera of my phone. It tells you the kind of phone I'm using. So the phone is about making a statement. It's not just about making a phone call. The same thing with, so you see that across board is the same thing, which is why, for example, somebody will tell you, oh, I don't drink sachet water. I drink, iodized table water, or I drink this kind of water and stuff like that. But if it is 50 cl in my sachet water for 50 cl, maybe I pay, I think it's 10 naira, 20 naira or so. I don't know how much it is now. Whatever it is, let's say 50 naira max. So I pay my 50 naira for the sachet water. The bottled water, the one that does not have a name, I pay my 200 naira and I'm good to go. But you say your own is one special brand. They've made you to believe that there's something special about it. And then they tell you that a bottle is 1,000 naira. And you feel proud that, or they even tell you a bottle is 2,000 naira. And then you say, oh, I consume 20 pieces of it in a week. So you realize that this person is about status, it's not about water. So you want to sell to that person, sell status to that person. The one that really wants to drink water, sell the same brand, the same thing. You didn't add anything. Sell the same thing to the other person who really wants to drink water in sachet water and sell it for 50 naira. So there's something that everybody wants. Sell to them from the angle of what they want.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That's quite interesting and informative. So this is where we would say we'll draw the curtain for today's series. And thank you so much again, Mr. Fola, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. Guys would jump on another one a couple of weeks later. And I hope you all have enjoyed yourself and learned something, most importantly, because it's always about, helping brands and helping everyone grow, not just brand. We have individual brands and all stuff. So thank you again for joining and see you guys later.